Associate Professor Dr. Yaacob Ibrahim.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, thank you for allowing me to join in this debate. Sir, I'm in support of the budget as outlined by the Minister for Finance, Mr. MC Ket. There is support for almost every segment of our society, from families to workers and our elderly. Of interest to me and my generation is the Merdeka Generation Package. I'm thankful that the government recognizes the generation that grew up in relative poverty, but who have put in so much hard work to build this new nation. Support has also been given to our small and medium enterprises, or SMEs, to help them flourish in a changing economy. So I will not touch on these topics as my more esteemed colleagues in this chamber will invariably present their views on them. Today, with your indulgence, I would like to share my views on two issues: on growing the economy and on the bicentennial commemoration. So of concern to me is the transformation of the economy. This is important as it will mean the continued survival of our nation, and I do not pretend it is an easy thing to do, something which Minister Heng acknowledged in his speech. Having been involved in this process in my previous incarnation, I can see the necessity of transformation. Nevertheless, I also share the concerns of our business community, especially our SMEs. So I'm currently advising IMDA on the digital transformation of the Kampung Glam district involving some 200 SMEs. I have been meeting these businesses to share with them the benefits of the digital revolution. Our SMEs can grasp that the world is changing and that their businesses must change too. Nevertheless, our SMEs face a myriad of challenges. For some, it is a matter of survival, making just enough sales to get by, while others hesitate to spend resources on something they're not sure will benefit their businesses. To me, transforming an economy is just not about economics. It is also about transforming our society, from business owners to workers, so that all levels of society embraces the spirit of change. At stake are the livelihoods of business owners and workers, the hopes and dreams of our families, and the future of our children. That is why my colleagues at IMDA and I will continue to undertake outreach and engagement so that we can help as many of our SMEs to adopt digital solutions. My hope, sir, is that government agencies will continue to listen and problem solve with us so that we can remove roadblocks to progress and remove misconceptions that prevent businesses from embarking on change. So there is another dimension to the economic transformation which I would like to speak on, and this regards building up the entrepreneurial culture among our young. The startup scene in Singapore is vibrant. I'm actively involved with several startups as advisor. I'm also involved with several networking sessions involving Malay Muslim startups and entrepreneurs. I meet many new entrepreneurs regularly, some young, some not so young. It is heartening to meet mid-career professionals who decided to give entrepreneurship a go. And I hope that some, if not all, succeed in making it big, thereby bringing some sense of achievement for our country as a whole. My concern, however, sir, is whether such a vibrancy is felt in our heartlands. I support MND's and HDB's efforts to refresh our towns, inject new businesses, and introduce new ways of encouraging interaction. In this regard, I'd like to suggest a fresh approach to instilling innovation and entrepreneurship. Many Singaporeans may remember replicating the exploits of Maradona or Ronaldo at the void decks, though they will also remember too how many at times they incurred the anger of the immediate neighbors staying on the second floor or of the town council officials. Many also may recall seeing Malay boys stripping their motorcycles to clean and make minor repairs at the void decks. These days, we see groups of professionals offering free repair services in the heartlands who are continuing that tradition of tinkering. Calling themselves Repair Kopitiam, they encourage homeowners to bring the broken appliances to the void decks for them to help homeowners learn how to repair the appliances. Our ability to repair things when they are broken is an important skill set that can help to reduce waste. More importantly, sir, it would help to reduce excessive consumption. So void decks offer a wonderful opportunity for the creative energies in our heartlands to be unlocked. I am proposing that we convert as many void deck spaces as feasible into smart void decks. I'm not suggesting that we just wire up the spaces for connectivity purposes only. I'm proposing that we convert these spaces into maker spaces for our heartlanders. A comfortable place where anyone can go to tinker, fix things, to create, to meet, and discuss new ideas and solutions for the community. So there are many parallels to this idea. It's not unique. Consider, for example, the number of community gardens that have flourished in our heartlands. I have 13 of such gardens in my own constituency, and we are now planning our 14th garden. These gardens have attracted residents whom we may not otherwise see in our grassroots events. Some have used the produce of the gardens to raise funds for their welfare committee, while others have used the gardens as venues to conduct healthy cooking classes with HPB. Another example that I can compare this to, sir, is the Active, Beautiful and Clean, or ABC Waters program, which I initiated as Minister for Environment and Water Resources. Before the ABC Water programs came about, there used to be many signs across our reservoirs warning the public not to do a variety of things near or in the reservoir. But to the credit of the PUB, they accepted my idea and created new recreational spaces out of our drains and reservoirs. That, sir, is creativity. More importantly, our reservoirs and water bodies are now full of life and activities. So I'm hopeful that if we do this right, we can turn our void decks into places of energy, life, and creativity. It requires, of course, our authorities to move away from an attitude of so strictly regulating these spaces that they have become sterile, void of life. We want to strike a balance so that some messiness is possible, but in return, the neighborhoods of our heartlands can become the birthplaces of mutual support, practical ingenuity, and great ideas. So my final point today is on the bicentennial commemoration. The Minister for Finance announced two initiatives, the Bicentennial Community Fund and the Bicentennial Bonus to support the commemoration. Interestingly enough, these measures are parked under the pillar of building a caring and inclusive society. So as I understand it, this commemoration is a ground-out effort in which different groups are encouraged to talk about their history, contributions, and other aspects that can help our current and succeeding generations understand our history better. Our Prime Minister, in his 2018 New Year Day message, called for us to use the bicentennial, and I quote, to reflect on how our nation came into being, how we have come this far since, and how we can go forward together. Since then, there have been several exhibitions, events, talks, and opinion pieces about this occasion. So I'm struck by the responses in our newspapers and social media, and in my conversations with my residents and volunteers. While there is broad-based support for the commemoration, there are also voices of concern and unease. One particular response struck me deeply. A certain Mr. Osman Siddiq wrote to the Straits Times, and his letter was published on the 4th of February 2019 issue. In it, he raised the insightful point that colonialism cannot just be presented from one community's perspective. The impact of colonialism on the indigenous population and their sense of loss and justice need also to be acknowledged. But he cautioned that the unhappiness is not directed at history, but at the very idea of colonialism, or specifically, how one could lose one's country to colonizers. He appealed for us to reflect on how such a historical event could have happened, and that Singaporeans must endeavor never again to lose our country to another. And he ended by asking us, having experienced colonial rule, to empathize with those societies, and I quote, whose lands are occupied against their will, even in this day and age. Sir, I cannot agree more with him on this issue. If we are to build an inclusive society, as mentioned by the Minister for Finance, then we need to ensure that inclusivity applies not just how we view the here and now, but also how we view our history as a people. We need to acknowledge that different communities have different historical experiences and memories. We need to recognize both the good and the bad. The coming of the British and the start of colonial rule in this region is an important event for all of us to reflect about. After all, the very language we use today in education, commerce, and in this chamber and many other facets of our life is a colonial heritage. But we also need to be cognizant that there are winners and losers in history. And history is written by the winners for the winners. 1819 is marked as the turning point in our history. And yet the sacking of a once vibrant Malacca Sultanate in 1511 by the Portuguese had also been highlighted by some historians as the turning point for the region. Some have speculated that it marked the death of the indigenous mercantile class, leaving the region more vulnerable to conquest by succeeding waves of European colonizers. It has led some to wonder what would have happened if this region had not experienced colonialism. What shape would indigenous politics have taken? So the first point I'd like to make is that we need to acknowledge the varying impact of colonialism on the indigenous populations and other populations. So I welcome the opportunity to use the bicentennial as an occasion to reflect on who we are. And I share Minister Heng's call to build a caring and inclusive society. Hence, this commemoration should aim to strengthen our ties as a nation by helping us better appreciate and understand the various communities' historical experiences and memories, as well as banish forever myths and misperceptions of our history that do damage to our communities. The first myth is that Singapore was a fishing village waiting to be discovered and transformed into a modern metropolis. In fact, historians have uncovered concrete evidence to suggest that Singapore was once a vibrant economic hub, not a fishing village waiting to be discovered by the enlightened British imperialists. And I quote here from the historian Peter Boschberg from his article, Singapore as a Port City, 1290 to 1819, Evidence, Frameworks and Challenges. Quote, there is an enduring perception in our historical consciousness that before the arrival of Raffles, Singapore remained unrecognized and underappreciated fellow land. However, as we dig deeper into the past, the mirror of history unabashedly refutes the belief that Singapore was a sleepy, backwater kampong, forgotten or neglected by the powers that trawled these waters for centuries. Similarly, it's also a misguided notion that no one had envisaged the presence of a port in Singapore before 1819. The impetus here is a larger one, not only for the history of the port, but also for Singapore's history as a whole. One cannot remain obstinate in only thinking about Singapore in terms of an East India Company or EIC settlement. While the transformative hand of the EIC and the British on Singapore is beyond doubt, there is a history of a port, settlement and island that runs far deeper than historians had surmised until about the beginning of the third millennium. Singapore was also far more intimately connected to its historical predecessors as well as locational context, close quote. So this is an important point. It is right that we acknowledge every event for what it is worth. The coming of the colonialists changed the region forever. And as it turns out, Singapore today is a thriving metropolis. But to overly ascribe this success to the coming of the British is to ignore larger forces at work well before the arrival of the British. So this commemoration also should lead us to a better appreciation of our community's history and our place in the region. Out of the colonial experience emerged many disturbing myths about this region, including the most toxic myth of the lazy native. This myth has been studied and debunked extensively, for instance, by the late Professor Syed Hussein Alatas in his famous book entitled The Myth of the Lazy Native, which tore apart the colonial ideology behind labeling the indigenous population as lazy for not wanting to work in the mines and plantations. Nevertheless, it still lingers in the minds of some people. When I was growing up in modern Singapore, my own teachers dismissed my community as being lazy and unable to study hard. So this is the burden of history that my community carries. It is unjust and unfair. If we are to commemorate the bicentennial, we must also recognize the less savory aspects of it, practices and ideas designed to meet the needs and maximize the profits of the empire at the expense of the indigenous population. In view of our long history, some historians have asked why not celebrate 700 years of our history? Why only focus on the 200 years? So I support this idea as it would help us to better understand 1819 as one milestone among many. I would also add that our history is intertwined with the history of the region. Our history points to certain truths about this region and Singapore. That, I think, is a point that needs to be stressed more by this commemoration. In this way, more, especially our young, understand how Singapore has been and will continue to be a part of the larger region, tapping on its good location and the talent of our diverse people to provide a peaceful hub for mutually beneficial trade and commerce. The diversity that we see here in Singapore reflects the diversity of the region and beyond. When I walk the corridors of the HDB flats in my constituency, I can hear different voices, dialects, and languages. My friends who hail from Bugis or Minang ancestry are proud of their heritage. So we are sons and daughters of Singapore and children of Nusantara. We should use this commemoration to celebrate the diversity that defines who we are and to promote a better understanding and appreciation for the long and rich history of Singapore and this region. Hence, I hope that this will not just be a one-off commemoration. Arising from this, we could consider looking at our history curriculum in schools to ensure that students are well-versed in pre-colonial history as well as a deeper understanding of the region. National education at the higher primary and lower secondary levels can be expanded so that Singaporeans better understand the colonial experiences of our ASEAN neighbors. Talk about both the good and the bad so that we know ourselves better and will never again be divided or colonized. Being part of this region, I strongly believe that we should have a good understanding and appreciation of the region's history. Our museums can do more to have spaces that touch on the subject of pre-colonial history and to give people access to the archaeological finds. At the same time, acknowledging how that history has impinged on our own history and the myriad strands of diversity of ideas, lifestyle, food, religions that have come together to enrich our own experience as both Singaporeans and Southeast Asians. Sir, I support the budget.